Lovely. Right, evening all. My name's Steve Cavannah and I work for Sellafield Limited. My learning colleague John Bibby. This presentation is all about working together in a partnership or in a joint venture. So what John and I have decided that we'll do the presentation between us because we're in a joint venture. Just before we go into all the detail, I'll just give you a little bit of background on myself and then John's going to do the same. I've been with Sellafield about just over 20 years. In that time, roles I've done is cost engineering, project control manager, senior project control manager, divisional project control manager, head of cost engineering, and I currently head up project controls from an engineering point of view, and the DSA, which is the Design Service Alliance, which is the details we're going to go through. John?
Yeah, we have to pass this around, don't we? So for my sins, I've worked for a long time with Amec Foster Wheeler. Before that I was working as a planner at Heathrow Airport on the Terminal 5 project. That was back when they still were kidding themselves it was going to cost $2 billion. Moved into the London Underground, moved around, ended up in nuclear with NNC, and obviously that became Amec Nuclear, and I've had various flirtations along the way with other companies, but nothing serious. So now I'm a project controls lead within a division of Amec Foster Wheeler. Okay, just a bit of background.
Cheers. Oh, I've also worked for ACostE, NNC, Bechtel, Nolan's, Hunting Oil, etc., etc. So there you go. Right, contents. Subjects or subjects or things you just wanted to discuss was answer some of the questions that were on the original information that was sent out. A short history of background again about the particular contract, because the type of contract that we're both currently working on is a little bit unique from Sellafield's point of view. We've never done that type of contract before, and it's 1.5 billion, so it is quite a large contract. Go through what the project control vision was, set up behaviours, delivering benefits, learning from experience, and then the secrets to success. I don't think we've really succeeded yet, but at least we think we know where we're going or what we want to do.
Okay, so we start to have a little look at the challenges to ensure effective project control in a joint venture arrangement, and we've as Steve mentions, we've talked about different elements of where we've had issues in particular situations. And then how do you ensure the best interests of the partners and the clients are met? So we've obviously got a different take on these subjects. So Steve's looking at this from the client side and how the JV meets the client's requirements. And I've looked at it more from inside a joint venture with three partners, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But I've looked more from the joint venture side and some of the issues we have, which I didn't really want to tell Steve about, so we'll see how we get on.
Right, just give you a little, just give you a little bit of background against the contract itself. There are some handouts there that you can have or take. That's round. The contract itself is was kicked off from Sellafield Limited. It's, as I said, it's 1.5 billion design overall, and it's an alliance framework contract. It is under EC3. And the contract itself with two companies, Progressive Alliance and the Axiom Alliance, to provide specialist design, engineering and safety case assessment. The contract originally was, currently is for 15 years, and we're in the 4th year at the moment. But it is one of the first contracts that Sellafield has decided to go down that route. And as I said, it's worth about 1.5 billion, but overall we're just in negotiations to let other contracts as well on a similar basis. Okay. Originally, when we first thought about the contract, the type of workload that we had beforehand, the way around contracts were let, were usually on a short-term basis, normally 4 years. It limited Sellafield's way of planning workload because nothing was long-term. We had separate processes. We tried to do everything transactional, tried to incentivise packages, etc. But what they wanted to do is to try and put a new way of working to try and get a much longer term relationship in place, because we knew the amount of work that we've got at Sellafield is hundreds of years. So they wanted to make sure that a lot of the work is done so that we don't lose people at the end of it and we can carry on that type of arrangement. The concept at the beginning was best athlete for the job, collaborative working, co-locations, building on high-performance teams, etc. The DSA itself is made up of Axiom, which is a consortium of Amec, Mott MacDonald, Jacobs and AC Systems, and the other side is Progressive, which you've got Cavendish and AECom, I think it's called, isn't it? Yeah. Which is on the brochures as well that have passed around. The way around that we agreed we could actually let the contracts through the government and through the NDA was that we then had to break it down into lots, and although it's Axiom and Progressive, we have to report as part of the central team as to report how each lot is performing and what the value of the lot is from an OJ point of view. So that's, you'll see a bit later on, that starts making it a bit complicated in what you're trying to do and how you're doing it. Current status. The contract's now been running for 3 years, just over 3 years. There was time breaks that were put into the contract so that we had to give notice to the contractors, so the partners, after 3 years, as whether or not we were going to continue or whether or not we were going to stop. We've just had approval in the last couple of weeks that we are going to continue. So now that means there's another 7 years on top of the 3 years, because there was a break every 5 years, if that makes sense. Commitment-wise, currently running at about 480 million. That includes, there's about 800 purchase orders, 5,000 odd tasks. We've spent 350 million up to date, and there's also, that's across about 200 projects, which that's the important thing, I think, because in the past, when you go into joint ventures, a lot of the time the joint ventures that come about is you're just on one project, and the joint venture, everybody is on that project working all together, and then from a project control point of view, it tends to make it a little bit easier because everybody is on that job full time. Whereas on this, what we're trying to do from a design service point of view is to deliver across the whole of the business to hundreds of projects all at the same time, and then try and roll all that data back together again. So that's why it starts getting a bit complicated.
So Steve and I got engaged. We started. We started having conversations. This should have rehearsed that bit. We started having conversations just after this kicked off. I mean, I got involved by sitting near to where the first members of the management team were sitting, and managed to sort of offer my services. I wasn't completely busy, so anything I can do to help fellas. And they introduced me to a report that needed to be sent to SL to be uploaded into the PRISM system, which had 10 lines on it at the time, which was great. I thought I could do this every month. Next month I had 20. By month 12 it was Friday night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm still there pulling my hair out trying to get the figures out. So we talk about some of the issues there. So some of the key principles we talked about were the intention to have fully integrated project controls teams providing seamless data flow between client and partner, eliminating duplication. So recognizing there was a lot of small tasks, we were trying to make it simple, make it consistent, make it easy to follow. Use existing processes and procedures from the various organisations, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, and just again a consistent approach. We were just trying to keep it simple so we could move people around projects, move people around in between partners, offices, high performance teams, and keep it consistent without causing problems for everyone. So we had to be careful. You'll notice this is on ACostE headed notepaper, headed slides. We didn't want to use SL and Amec Foster Wheeler slides. We are giving our opinions on things. We're not saying this is SL's opinion. We had to get all sorts of sign off if we were going to do that. So we've kept it very simple. I should probably add that this is not the ACostE's view of things either. This is just Steve and myself. Okay, so we talked about the different sort of subjects. So we talked about, we'll talk about the setup of the thing and the issues, some of the issues we had, some of the behaviours we saw, and then some of the delivering benefits, which is quite a specific contract terminology, so we'll get to that a little bit later on.
Part of the setup, when we originally kicked the contract off, these are some of the issues or the things that came about was that one of the areas that we, from a project control point of view, we didn't really get an opportunity to have a big engagement is when the contract was being let, or they were even thinking about it, I should say. The project control side of it was a bit of an afterthought rather than how we were going to get involved and what the expectation was and what was going to be reported. So my advice would be in the future, which is we're trying to do now, is to try and get involved as early as possible. There was project control requirements were part of the contract when it was let, but it was all let against on the basis of it would be certain types of packages, and it became clear very quickly that the packages themselves weren't necessarily going to be that type of work, i.e. it was all against scoped work. But a lot of the work to start with was bums on seats, basically. And also, what was considered from the project managers and the commercial point of view was how they were actually going to get data, but what wasn't really considered is how they were actually going to work together, who was going to do what and why. That does become quite apparent because when Axiom, for instance, started to kick off, that was a combination of about 4 different companies, and I don't think they'd really arranged how they were actually going to work together, never mind try to work with us as well.
So this was just some of the issues that we had within the Axiom joint venture. So sort of setup, question mark, exclamation mark. We didn't really have a setup. That was part of the problem. We were straight into delivering the projects. I think through conversations around placing the contract and lead-in once the contract was placed, I don't think Sellafield were allowed to place contracts through any other means. So until this was in place, there was a bit of a backlog developing, and that kind of hit us fairly quickly. So we were straight into delivery. Axiom as a joint venture delivered £31 million across around 250 separate tasks in the first year, which for any kind of new business would be, well, it is an achievement, and it's something that the joint venture is very proud of. In parallel with all of that, you're trying to produce procedures, get consistency, develop a brand, agree appropriate behaviours, and we'll talk about some of that later on. So we didn't have any joint venture-wide systems in place, so we were trying to set up standard work breakdown structures that were very simple. With the benefit of hindsight, maybe too simple, maybe too restrictive, didn't allow more experienced people the flexibility to do some of the things that they wanted to do. We did have a time booking system that was in place, the Replicon system, which is by chance that went in started on the same Monday as Amec Foster Wheeler's new time booking system. And so Replicon wasn't perfect by any stretch, but it was a hell of a lot better than Amec Foster Wheeler's model. So we came out of that looking very good. Generally across the joint venture, there was no understanding of SL's reporting requirements because things have been placed on contracts have been placed through the 4 partners, so they're all familiar with the work, but they've been placed on a sort of a piecemeal basis. So there was input into SL's reporting requirements, but it was all dealt with internally by SL, so a lot of us hadn't seen some of the reports that we were being asked to produce. And again, we had 4 different partners, same at Foster Wheeler, ACostE and Jacobs Mott MacDonald, all using different reporting mechanisms. A Mott MacDonald project manager managing Amec people would ask for different information than he would when managing different, a different partner's project manager managing the work. On the bottom one there was the joint venture branding. So we didn't set out with Axiom hats on. We all were dealing as 4 different partners, 4 competitors essentially, and we cover that a bit more in behaviours. So we were talking using Amec Foster Wheeler email addresses, Jacobs email addresses with Jacobs PPE, and it was an inconsistent message, and that was something that the project managers raised because they were the ones at the coalface really dealing with the clients. It was something they raised. It was in the November. I think we managed to sit down with all the PMs for the first time. We'd started in the March. So branding would have helped us become Axiom a bit quicker, I think. Benefits of hindsight again. And the behaviours, so there's obviously this was a new arrangement for our 4 partners, for a lot of SL as well, so we thought it was worth talking about some of the behaviours that were there.
Change behaviours. Right. SL, I don't think, really understood exactly what they expected of them, to work like a partner. They were all in the mindset of a subcontractor, so they wanted to carry on as a subcontractor, and a lot of the project managers just wanted to carry on. They didn't see that they had to change any of the habits or anything else. I must admit, 3 or 4 years on, that you can now see quite a big change, and they are starting to work down that way. We found it difficult to fully engage on project control issues with the partners, mainly because they hadn't appointed project control managers. So I was appointed right at the beginning, didn't actually have anybody to talk to on either side. Progressive did appoint somebody quite quickly, but Axiom, John, you were in the role for a while, weren't you? And then they moved up to somebody else, and they disappeared. So, so it came and gone. But there again, that's now in place and working very well, isn't it, Steve? There was lack of commitment, I think, from the partner's point of view. Even right from the outset, the lead team from Axiom didn't, because of the guy that was in charge at the time, didn't really see any benefit from project control. In which case, he was very dismissive, or they just count numbers. They don't mean anything. They're not giving us anything. So it took quite a while for him to see the light, and then he got moved on. And the current guy in charge of Axiom's doing a great job. Difficult work in the new consortium. That was also because they had to also develop new ways of working and how they're going to work with us, as well as Sellafield had to do it the opposite way around. And vague roles and responsibilities. Although there was a lot in the NEC contract as to how and what the expectation was, nobody had really worked through what it actually meant. So everybody was trying to deliver the work as well as try and develop it as they were going along, which did prove quite difficult. John's.
This is the controversial slide. This is where we haven't got the company logos on it. So essentially, some of the behaviours that we were seeing at the start of the joint venture, again, a lot better now, was that we were 4 partners, but we were 4 competitors as part of a joint venture, and we still were, I think, generally speaking, competing for the same work as 4 separate companies. Which didn't put us in a positive light in the frame of in the sight of the client in a lot of cases. There was a work share debate, so I mentioned this fair and equitable. This was fair and equitable was something in the joint venture agreement that was when talking about work share, the work share split was supposed to be fair and equitable, and that meant different things to different partners. So Amec Foster Wheeler's view, just generally speaking, no, not pointing any fingers at anyone, was that Amec Foster Wheeler were doing 40% of this work before this joint venture was awarded, so fair and equitable to them was 40% carrying on through the arrangement. ACostE, I don't think we're doing anywhere near that. I think they were in single figures in terms of percentage of the work that they were moving on to. So their view of fair and equitable was that there are 4 partners, let's split it 4 ways. So you start to add 40 plus 25 plus Jacob's expectation, and you end up with 150, on top of the commitment that we have to give to the supply chain. So fair and equitable was a slightly different things to different people. Again, operating at risk, the 4 different partners, we were under strict instructions from the commercial people not to work at risk without the relevant business manager, project director approval for various levels of commitment. So without purchase order, we were not allowed to work, was the instruction. Other partners had a different approach to that. They, as long as there's somebody, a faceless person within their organisation said it was okay, off they went. And incurred, we had lots of uninvoiced work to many hundreds of thousands of pounds before the management team realised that this was happening. Again, I mentioned the branding earlier on. The client was unsure who they were dealing with. So the joint venture engaged the supply chain as part of the arrangement. It was all part of the tendering, so Sellafield identified who they wanted as part of the supply chain. Very often the client and the supply chain were talking directly to each other. So, the supply chain hadn't had a purchase order. Where's my purchase order, Mr. Sellafield? Well, it's not up to us to place it. So there were difficult issues. And then the body shopping, Steve mentioned earlier on that that was a more polite way of saying bums on seats, I thought. So very early on in the arrangement, we were expecting to get quite quickly to fixed price scoped packages of work that we could deliver and make a bit of money off, not to put too fine a point on it. But the view early on was that we want a mechanical engineer, we want a project manager, and it was very similar to previous arrangements, very small, difficult to control, very difficult to demonstrate any value for. So these are some of the things. I mean, I could do 3 or 4 slides on some of the things, but I didn't want to be too controversial. So these are some of the things that we saw early on. Delivering benefits is the contract terminology for how we as an alliance demonstrate to the NDA that we're giving them value for money. So Steve talks more generally here about the relationship with the NDA and the value for money side, and I'm talking from the JV. The lack of willingness, I guess, to do the paperwork to demonstrate that we're saving money. But the delivering benefits is fundamental to the delivery of the alliance. We have to be seen to be saving the NDA money. That's the whole point of why we were doing it. Sorry if I still have my thunder there.
Okay, so I must admit it has taken a couple of years, but we are now seeing quite a lot of benefits in working closely together. I would say more than a glimmer of light, to be fair. Now that people are much more on board how they're meant to be working, but it has taken quite a much longer than I would have expected to reach the relationships between ourselves and the partners to start to see benefits out of it. One of the issues right from the word go is nobody could really decide what was the best from a systems point of view and processes point of view. From an SL point of view, we didn't want to impose things on the partners because we were in a partnership, but nobody really stood up and said, right, we're going to do this. Right from the outset, we collectively, through project controls, decided we were going to put a new cost processor in place. So there was a business case put together. We were going to try and bring it in, work between us, all work in one system. But when it went back to the board for approval, this is the DSA board, nobody would really wanted to fund it, because from a partner's point of view, what they were saying is, well, we don't really know how this is going to develop, we don't know if we're going to make money out of it, and there wasn't any separate funding within SL at the time. Now we've moved on, we're now reaching a stage now where previous to that, we couldn't really allow the partners to work in our systems because our systems were all really old and twacky and starting to fall apart anyway. So we needed internally to spend quite a lot of money updating our hardware, updating on our software, which we've just currently done now. So going forward, I think there will be a lot of benefits in all working in one system and all working together, and that's what we're currently working towards. What we're also trying to do, which was in the concept of the whole contract in the first place, was not have man-to-man marking, i.e. instead of like Axiom or Progressive doing some data and sending it to us and us regurgitating it, we're going to have shared process and shared systems so that we all work in one area and all that it's done once, and the data itself should be capable of going back out to the partners and satisfying what our requirements are as well. One of the things that, as John just rightly said, is that I keep getting hit over the head for, especially from the NDA, is that because of the type of contract it is and the value of it, we've got to demonstrate value for money. Now then, a lot of the work we're currently doing is in integrated teams, and when you've got an integrated team, it's the output from the integrated team gives you whether or not you're getting your CPI and your SPI and making money, etc. But what the NDA keep insisting on is, well, no, what they want to know is just on the partner's workload. How do we get value for money just on the partner, not on the client, or the way around that we are? So if anybody has got any advice as to the best way that they've come across that in the past, I'd be more than willing to listen, because what we're trying to do currently is do it on the amount of work that's influenced by the partners, i.e. if there's £1 million contract and they're providing 80% of the workload, the workforce, then they've got the biggest influence. So the cost variance, for instance, is mainly down to the partner, not down to the SL side of it. Not totally, but people seem to be happy with that. But it is very difficult trying to come up with something. Sorry.
Okay. So within the contract, the delivering benefits, again, the terminology is specific to the contract. So there is a form that is intended to be filled in at the end of each task that we do, each individual little project, which demonstrates the savings that we've made. Again, within integrated teams, you've got the right people in the right positions. So the right project manager managing the work, the right design authority, the right design lead, the right engineers, not necessarily just because they're from a particular partner. But quantifying the benefits has proved to be difficult. So we were, in the first year, more so than I think more recently, we were under a lot of pressure from our joint venture exec and the project director to fill in, regardless of what it contained, fill in a delivering benefits form. Say you've saved Sellafield some money, or the NDA some money ultimately. But there was a general malaise around the project managers that maybe they didn't understand why, but the NDA were adding all these things up to give them a picture of, well, we've spent this much money, but we've saved this much, and this much they've saved is based on these delivering benefits forms. So we tried having arguments to say, well, you know, if you've only saved 10k, and we do that 100 times, I'm not a cost engineer, but that comes up to a decent number. But what the PMs were trying to look for was the one project that saved them £1 million. And so it was very difficult for a small package of work. You know, it's not worth it. I haven't saved much. But if everybody realised that little bit of not much all adds up to something substantial, you know, we were trying to get the buy-in. But again, it's the age-old project management problem. You finish one task, you don't want to box it off because you've already been given your next one. We did a PM forum not so long ago actually, and again we brought up the delivering benefits, and this last one was a quote from one of the PMs that they needed estimators and planners to quantify the benefits. Now nobody was asking them to do it to the penny. It was, but you know, just be able to underpin the potential savings that you've made. So don't just pull £50,000 out of the air without being able to underpin it with something. But you don't need an estimator or a planner to quantify some of the value. Okay, so we've talked about a few examples of learning from experience there, and we talked about our current state earlier. So this was just sweeping it all together as a potential future state. So we talked about we've had conversations around needing to understand the drivers for data requirements, including client reporting, project reporting, value for money reporting, contract reporting, and parent company requirements. So it's understanding at the bottom level, if you like, the supply chain need to understand what the NDA wants, 3 or 4 steps removed, tiers removed. The need to have compatible systems is something we've talked about again, and we're trying to be consistent with things, make things simpler, make the data transfer seamless. Need to be supported from their peers. So this is a point around the project control side. You know, early on we didn't get the recognition that we could help to demonstrate that we are being efficient, that we are, you know, if we'd have been engaged a little bit more, I might still be doing the job. But you know, it makes the job of a project controller a lot easier. If you know, I can give you some of the quotes. You know, we were accused of being a cottage industry and creating work for ourselves. Cost engineers were people who were good with numbers and spreadsheets. There was no understanding of the value that could be added by a project controls community. And I'll make sure that Steve gets the credit for the last point. I would never be so foolish to accuse SL of being arrogant. But Steve's just saying that SL assumed that we knew what they wanted when we'd been providing information in small packages, and SL were manipulating that information to fulfil their requirements. We, as a JV, I think, in general, never understood what we were providing or what we needed to provide and why, and that became apparent pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, one of the issues that I go to constantly at the moment is I get called into meetings where they say, oh, the DSA aren't giving us what we want. And when you actually sit down around the table with the people from both sides, the partner's side as well as SL, and you actually say to SL, well, why assume the partner knows what you want? Because a lot of the time you haven't actually told him. All it is an assume that, oh, you need to give us reports, this, that and the other, but they've never showed them how they want to see it, so it's consistency across the whole company and what level of detail that you want. And then when you sit down and explain both sides what's needed to deliver against the project and the level of detail that's required, then the number of times the issues have just disappeared. So one of the main things I would say as part of the secret to success is working together. If you sit down and if you've got any issues whatsoever and you sit down in a room and discuss it, 99% of the time the issue goes away. Both sides understand what is requirement, when it's required, and just having good communication and trust that if you ask somebody that they're going to do something, they actually do it, and the data flows through the systems and you end up with a success. Whereas if you have a confrontation against each other all the time, saying, well, I've told him he needs to give me that and he hasn't given it me, but not actually found out why, or is it a problem, or can't you produce that, then that's when you have issues and problems. Whereas sit down, discuss it, agree it up front, make sure everybody exactly understands what is needed and when it's needed, and most of the time you tend to get it, because I'm not being funny, project control is not hard. I think most of the time we just make it hard.